społecznego. Nikt nikomu nie mówi, jaki jest jego status. Jest do pracy kogoś, mu zakres obowiązków.
It's 6 o'clock in Central Europe. A long day in Vietnam peace talks in Paris, former President Truman in serious condition in Kansas City, and more killings in Northern Ireland.
The 6 o'clock report, an expanded summary of world developments, including today in Europe, compiled from the wires of the AP and UPI, with reports from the major American networks.
Good evening, I'm David Minot. Astronauts are to awaken at this hour to complete the final preparations for their launch tonight to the moon. NBC's Jay Barbary reports everything is progressing well in advance of the blast-off, although some concern is being expressed about the weather.
The countdown for perhaps man's last visit to the moon for decades continues on schedule here for tonight's blast-off, with weathermen keeping a wary watch on a fast-moving cold front. Officials are somewhat concerned with the front, but feel they have a better than 50-50 chance it will not interfere with the 9:53 p.m. Eastern Time liftoff. Astronauts Eugene Cernan, Ronald Evans, and Harrison Smith, the men who will make the first after-dark launch, are sleeping late this morning, getting their sleep cycle adjusted for the journey to a landing in a lunar valley that may be the location of the last volcanic activity on the moon. There, astronaut Harrison Smith, a geologist who is the first scientist to go to the moon, will join command pilot Eugene Cernan in search of the youngest moon rocks as well as the oldest. Jay Barbary, NBC News, Cape Kennedy.
It's 10 o'clock in Central Europe. Former President Truman in serious condition. President Nixon makes 2 cabinet announcements and another session of the secret Indochina peace talks in Paris.
The 10 o'clock report, an expanded summary of world developments compiled from the wires of the AP and UPI, with reports from the major American networks.
Good evening, this is Bob Andresen. His latest and last scheduled moon mission is drawing near. UPI at Cape Kennedy, Florida, says all systems aboard Apollo 17 are go.
Everything looks good so far for the planned moon voyage of Apollo 17 tonight. Astronauts Cernan, Evans, and Schmidt are to lift off at 9:53 Eastern Time. 9 minutes later, the first stage, Saturn launch vehicle, will separate and fall to the Atlantic Ocean over 300 nautical miles downrange. Just under 20 minutes into the mission, the second stage will drop to the ocean. After a brief parking orbit around the Earth, Apollo 17 will enter translunar trajectory. Then comes separation and docking with the lunar module and release of the spent third stage, which will eventually crash into the moon, providing impact data for seismographs placed by earlier Apollo missions. Cernan and Schmidt are due for a moon landing next Monday afternoon. This is Maury Trumbull at Cape Kennedy.
AFN News plans to provide live coverage of the launch of Apollo 17 beginning at 3:45 tomorrow morning Central European Time.
Moon buggy number 3 on Apollo 17 may go down in history for scientific achievements besides its technological record of some 23 miles of moon touring. The little lunar rover is scheduled to take astronauts Cernan and Schmidt over the black ashes of a moon volcano that scientists think may be only 1 million years cold. Moon buggy number 3 will also be driven around some huge boulders in an avalanche. Scientists think these boulders may be over 4.5 billion years old, or the solidification of the original celestial dust that made up the moon. But the last anyone will know of Moon Buggy 3 will be when its TV camera records the deliberate crashing of the mothership in the closing days of Apollo 17. Merrill Mueller, ABC News, Cape Kennedy.
It's 3 o'clock in Central Europe. Everything looks good for the launching of Apollo 17.
AFN News, from the wires of the AP and UPI.
Jan Wood, AFN News reporting. Good morning. Everything is go for the Apollo 17 moon launch at 9:53 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3:53 this morning Central European Time. Astronauts Eugene Cernan, Ronald Evans, and Harrison Jack Schmidt are reported ready and anxious to start their journey, the last of the moon missions in the Apollo program. Before going to bed Wednesday night, they received a telephone call from President Nixon wishing them well. The crowd jamming beaches near Cape Kennedy is estimated in the hundreds of thousands. Invited guests inside the moonport include Vice President Spiro Agnew.
Astronauts Gene Cernan, who's a Navy captain, and Jack Smith, a civilian geological scientist, will be on their way to becoming the last Americans to set foot on the moon in the decade, and perhaps in the 20th century. Cernan and Smith will set up a complex of scientific instruments, some of which hopefully will be operational for months or even years. They will make 3 trips in their lunar rover through a moon valley in the Taurus Mountains, where they hope to find samples of both the oldest and youngest moon rocks. Ron Evans will be orbiting the moon alone, conducting another set of experiments, including a long-distance sounder which will record a profile of the moon's basic structure nearly a mile below its surface. This is Paul Roberts at Cape Kennedy.
AFN's live coverage of the Apollo 17 launch will begin at 3:45. AFN News, and we are awaiting the Apollo 17 coverage live from Cape Kennedy. America's Apollo 17 explorers boarded Spaceship America last night, ready to rocket toward the moon on what may be man's last journey in this century to an alien world. Navy Captain Eugene Cernan, geologist Harrison Schmitt, and Naval Commander Ronald Evans secured themselves in their cabin atop a giant Saturn V rocket at 7:20 p.m. Cape Kennedy time, or at 1:20 a.m. Central European time. And now, let's go to Cape Kennedy for live coverage from ABC News.
3 miles from us, fueled and ready, the floodlights around that rocket reflecting off some clouds about 15,000 feet up. It's a warm night, mild winds. The countdown very smooth so far. The astronauts are aboard, and in less than 8 minutes, they'll ride that big rocket booster off the pad. It is the first night launch, and it promises to be one of the most spectacular sights of a lifetime. The beginning of the last mission of the moon. My colleague Merrill Mueller.
The presence of Vice President Agnew in the launch control has just been announced. Apollo 17 is aimed for a 3-mile box canyon that may be filled with volcanic ash in the upper right-hand corner of the moon. Apollo 17 carries half a dozen new scientific instruments, which may finally determine whether the moon has a hot center and whether it possesses underground water. Apollo 17 is commanded by space veteran Eugene Cernan, a Navy captain. He was the pilot spacewalker of Gemini 9, and he flew within 10 miles of the moon on Apollo 10. Mothership America will be piloted by Navy Commander Ronald Evans, a rookie. Moonlander Challenger will carry the world's first astroscientist, Jack Schmitt, another space rookie, but a Harvard-trained geologist. Apollo 17 tonight is the heaviest space launching ever attempted at 3,266 tons. That's only a few hundred pounds below the rocket's capabilities. Here at Cape Kennedy, we are at T-minus 6 minutes and sub-seconds and counting. George?
This night launch, Red, now due in a few minutes, will be visible as far as 500 miles north of the Carolinas, west of Birmingham, Alabama, south to Cuba. About 500,000 people have crowded in and around the Kennedy Space Center to see it close and to take some pictures. They tell us those rocket flames will be bright as daylight. Camera lenses should be set accordingly. The crowd includes the 6 surviving original astronauts here at Cape Kennedy and the full crew of Apollo 11, all waiting for the launch, which is now scheduled in just about 6 minutes. Red?
The last range safety checks are being made now, and we should have an announcement from Launch Control and Chuck Holland's head. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 5 minutes, 54 seconds, and counting. At this time, entering the final phases of the countdown, various elements of the team reporting into Test Supervisor Bill Schick for their no-goes for launch. At launch time, a water deluge system at the pad will spray water over the entire area of the pad, some 400,000 gallons of water, more than an average family would use in 3 years, will be spread over the pad and the swing arms, protecting them from the searing flames of the Saturn V first stage. Various elements reporting in now. First stage reporting they are go. Range safety, Superintendent of Range Operations, they are go. Launch Operations Manager reports he is go for launch. Launch Director Walter Caprian has given a go for launch.
We passed the 5-minute mark, T-minus 4 minutes, 55 seconds and counting, and swing arm number 9 now coming back to the fully retracted position. The launch escape system sitting atop the spacecraft named America by the crew, now could pull the crew to safety if there were any problems while the vehicle remains on the pad or during the early portions of the flight. At the T-minus 4-minute mark, we'll be standing by for a word from the launch vehicle test conductor, Norm Carlson, giving it clear for launch for the launch vehicle ignition.
I'm up on the roof now.
3 minutes,
Clear
7
view.
seconds. We'll go on an automatic sequencer. It's called the terminal countdown sequencer.
The position I'm at, atop the ABC complex, about 3 miles from launch site.
Now, reporting and thanking the launch team for all their prayers and all their help. T-minus 3 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Apollo 17, the launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed, reports the launch operations manager over the Astrocom circuit.
Very large
T-minus
crowd here.
3 minutes, 40 seconds, the countdown continuing to go along smoothly. Once we go on the terminal countdown sequencer, the count will be automatic from there on out. The countdown sequencer will initiate the various functions from that time on.
That is Chuck Hollinshead from Launch Control. Apollo 17 still is like a brilliant star out there at Launch Complex 39, bathed with some 70 searchlights, all of which have just been lowered slightly so that they are hitting the bulk body of the large rocket rather than at the top where the command module sits. And in a few moments we will have another. This is live coverage of the liftoff of Apollo 17. This is Merrill Mueller with George Engle at Cape Kennedy, and George has gone up to our rooftop observation tower to watch this liftoff. George?
Thank you, Red. I'm up on the rooftop now on top of the ABC complex. A very large crowd all around us here. Several thousand people here assembled just 3 miles from the launch site to watch this. It should be sensational. Let's go back to Chuck Hollinshead now and pick up the countdown.
2 minute, 30-second mark. Pressurization of the various propellant tanks now aboard the space vehicle is starting. S2, or second stage, liquid oxygen tanks now pressurized. These propellant tanks are pressurized with helium to ensure that during the flight the fuel flows properly down through the engine. It's quiet here in the firing room now as the men are monitoring their consoles, looking at the temperatures, checking pressures, and a variety of parameters to ensure everything is in a go condition.
The computer is starting now.
Pressurization continuing on the fuel tanks. At this time, we'll go to the critical power transfer at the T-minus 50-second mark in the countdown. At that time, we'll transfer from our external power source to the flight batteries aboard the space vehicle. The final action by the crew aboard the spacecraft America will be a final guidance alignment. This conducted by the spacecraft commander, Gene Cernan. The flight of Apollo 17 will be able to be seen, depending on weather conditions, some 500 miles away as it goes into Earth orbit. Pressurization continuing. Liquid hydrogen tanks now aboard the second stage have been pressurized. All propellants aboard the second stage now pressurized. A cover aboard the cue ball. This is the cue ball system on top of the launch escape system. Will be pulled off just shortly before launch. Less than a minute. First stage propellant tanks have been pressurized. Now past the 1 minute mark, and we are going on internal power. Now all systems to internal power. We'll be looking for the engine start sequence at the 8.9-second mark in the countdown. The engines will build up to a thrust of 7.6 million pounds. T-minus 30 seconds. We have a cutoff. We have a cutoff at T-minus 30 seconds. Clock has stopped.
There's the delay.
We're standing by at T-minus 30-second mark. Fuel is sending word to you just as soon as we get it. We have a cutoff at T-minus 30 seconds.
Something's wrong in the sequence timer. Something didn't check out.
Kennedy Launch Control.
The computer has stopped this.
Something has gone wrong, Red. There's no telling at this point exactly what it is.
We've got fuel venting from both the major rockets in the stack, but this is normal. This is normal at this time. They did not cap the fuel, and that's probably where the sequence is off. The fuel tank should have been capped just before Chuck Hollinshead said we have, I've forgotten the phrase he used, but we have some kind of an interrupt. He called attention to that, and that was, they were coming up on the point where they should have capped the fuel tanks. That has not happened. That may have been the sequencer that's out of whack.
The people I can see around me here viewing the launch area are looking at each other rather puzzled. Nobody has any idea what it is.
Control, we're holding at the 30-second mark. This was an automatic cutoff, cut off by the terminal sequencer. As mentioned, this sequencer initiates various actions. Each action must take place and must be completed before the next one can be initiated. If anything does not get completed in time, there will be an automatic cutoff. This cutoff was automatic, done by the sequencer. We're standing by now to check just what the problem was. Now, T-minus 30 seconds and holding. This is Kennedy, Launch Control.
All right, we can all calm down for a minute while they analyze this. We've got about 3 hours and 40 or 45 minutes of hold time. And everything's safe and stable out there on the launch complex. No problems, no safety concern for the astronauts. Vice President Agnew is being briefed right now, I'm told, in the launch control as to where the cutoff came, but of course they'll backtrack on the data from the computer to find out why something didn't drop where it should have been within that sequencer. George?
Exactly where they'll go back in the countdown now.
The astronaut crew aboard the spacecraft going through their various safing now, safing of all systems, and the launch team here continuing through their emergency procedures. We'll be standing by to check out the problem just as soon as we can get word.
All the rocket stations are venting now, George. I don't know whether you can see the top one. Can you see it?
No, I can't see any venting on the top, Red. There's nothing visible up here from the top of the stack. But there is obvious venting from the first and second stages. The S1C stage, the big booster that will take it up originally, and then the S2 stage, the second stage. The indication we will get evidently that exactly where this is going to start and when will come from the countdown clock. At least that's the latest information that we have right now. The people who are out here, and there are hundreds of them right in front of me, immediately visible, haven't taken their eyes off that rocket for more than a second at a time, just enough time to turn around and ask the next person, what in the world's gone wrong? Well, nobody's answering that question because it's not terribly clear yet, but people are still watching that rocket and waiting for that countdown clock to continue. Red?
The last time this happened was with Walter Schirra on top of Gemini. And at that point, it took them about 20 or 30 minutes to discover that an electric plug had disconnected too early and thrown out the sequencer. It had dropped off instead of being disconnected, as it should have been, and it had thrown the sequencer out. This has to be a matter of something within the last 30 minutes of the countdown, because the countdown has been ahead of schedule all day. It has gone very smooth, and electronically has been ahead of schedule. So something came out of order in the past 30 minutes. We'll just have to wait and see what it was.
All these cheerful reports we've been receiving all day have, I guess, kind of lulled us into a false sense of security. When we got down to 30 seconds, we all assumed it was going to go. And, of course, the possibility always exists that something can come up, something can hold it up. That is a terribly complex machine out there.
Apollo Saturn Launch Control, the safing procedures continuing at this time. Up to the T-minus 30-second mark, the countdown had been proceeding smoothly. Weather conditions at launch were predicted to be and appeared to be good at that time. However, we had an automatic cutoff from the terminal countdown sequencer, and we're standing by to see just what caused that automatic cutoff. All systems being safed at this time. T-minus 30 seconds, and we are in a hold. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
If we were surprised by this, Red, imagine how these rescue units are, the helicopters that have been flying terribly close to that rocket all this time. They've been on station now for about 45 minutes, and I assume that they expected that rocket to go on time. And when their clocks ticked off and nothing happened, I would suspect that they were a little puzzled about the whole thing. Red?
I'm just running back on our countdown schedule as we worked through it, George, this afternoon, and it was less than 2 hours ago that they did the emergency detection system test on the whole stack out there, all three rockets and the command ship, and of course the moonlander is hidden inside part of the rocket, but it was tested out as well, And that emergency detection system test went perfectly smoothly, which indicated that everything was in good shape. It is that system which has caused the stopping of the clock and the stopping of the countdown and the holding the fuel vents open. That system, called EBS for short by the spacemen, is an automatic little black box, really, and it's in the instrument unit section of the rocket, and it acts like split lightning. If it doesn't get the signals in proper sequence, and if it doesn't get them at the right time, it automatically triggers everything along the line, and the clock stops, and that's the situation we're in.
So we're about 6 or 7 minutes late now with the launch. We'll explain that again for anybody who has missed what has happened so far. The launch is in a hold position, 30 seconds remaining on the clock. Something has gone wrong. Apparently, it is no immediate emergency. The system has simply stopped. The sequence, the automatic computer sequence, which is to set the rocket off, just called something wrong and just shut down. And that's where it is now. It's holding. It's waiting. And we're waiting to find out exactly what it is and how long the delay might be. As Red mentioned a few moments ago, there is plenty of time. There's almost 4 hours in this window. That is the available time for launch tonight. A delay beyond that time would mean tomorrow night for a launch, exactly the same time, 9:53. But there is no indication that we will have a one-day delay, Red.
We are in a far safer and far more comfortable position right now than we would have been if the clock had run another 30 seconds. At that point, fuel would have started running to the main turbines in the main engines, and you have a contamination problem with that. You also have a great danger of fuel spillage if the fuel isn't ignited at the right moment. And there would have been some concern then. There are safety procedures for that situation. We missed it by 30 seconds, and we're waiting for the word from launch control. We're told that launch control is analyzing the data tape, looking for the situation. Chuck Holland said.
Apollo Saturn launch control. We're continuing in our hold at the 30-second mark while the launch team assesses our problem. The swing arm number 9, will be brought back to its park position, which is 12 degrees back from the space vehicle. Continuing the safing procedures this time and assessing the problem. Holding at T-minus 30 seconds. This is Kennedy, launch control.
That swing arm, of course, George, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that's Chuck Holland there telling us exactly where it stands right now, and what he's saying is he doesn't quite know where it stands, right?
That swing arm, of course, is opposite the main hatch of the Apollo command ship America, and being 12 degrees away, it is quick enough to throw in within a split second if the astronauts decide to pop the hatch and get out of there. There's no reason for them to do so. This rocket in its present condition is as stable as it has been for the past several weeks. It's been partly loaded with fuel for weeks, ever since the countdown test some weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And the completion of fuel loading was early this afternoon, and it's been venting ever since, and it's venting now. So there's no danger of any explosion on the launch pad. What they're concerned about is finding the problem and whether it's a problem that would restrict the launch or put a constraint on the launch that might lead everybody to decide to wait for another day. There's only one extra day in the calendar. They either go tonight, or they have to go tomorrow night, or they have to wait 30 days. George?
That'll be January 4th for the launch in case of a delay that long. Might point out that the venting of the fuel, the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen that we see coming from the rocket right now, about 3 miles away from us, is perfectly normal. It is extremely cold. It boils at very low temperatures. And right now it's just boiling away, and it's being replenished as it goes along automatically. I assume that replenishing of fuel supplies is still going on. Otherwise, that would be a further constraint, another problem with the launch, if they had to quickly refuel and delay for that procedure. So I assume that the continuing flow of fuel goes on. It's still being fed and chilled, and it's still in a ready-to-go condition as soon as they find out what's wrong with it.
We have an unofficial report, George, that the emergency detection system, I can't say that tonight.
That's a terrible word.
EDS suddenly read a signal that said the launch tower was not clean, not clear. So that would indicate that a hose fell in the wrong position or a swing arm didn't go all the way back. In other words, that the problem holding the launch has to do with the launch tower, not with the rocket system. So we're waiting for word on that. That's unofficial at the moment, George, but it may be that a swing arm didn't go back and hit the button to indicate that the tower was clear.
That is an extremely sensitive device out there, that great big 36-story rocket. It is capable of reading all sorts of problems and malfunctions, no matter how minor. And if they fall within the parameters of the limits that might cause some danger or cause some problem, then it automatically just shuts off. The computer, we've heard a few remarks that the computer shouldn't do it, that someone should have his finger on the button. Well, of course, someone inevitably does. But the computer itself stopped this, and it stopped it for its own reasons. Fred?
George, we're going to recycle, as I understand it. Houston is advising everybody that they're going to recycle back to 22 minutes. The purpose of that time, that means 22 minutes before liftoff signals. The purpose of that time is to get the two spaceships off their internal batteries. In other words, put them back on ground power, ground electrical power, to save the flight batteries. That's the main purpose of that 22-minute timeline. That 22-minute timeline would also indicate that the data shows nothing wrong within the rocket stacks or the command ships, but they're still analyzing it. We're still waiting for word.
If there was something obviously wrong, seriously wrong, you assume that they would go back a lot farther in the countdown than that and check it out. But 22 minutes, as Red said, just rests the batteries. Takes them back to the point where those batteries switch to their own internal power, will conserve some of their reserve power.
And we're waiting to see if the clock is being recycled back. It has not begun to move yet, but if it should be moving within the next minute, for example, that would make launch around 10:27 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. But we'll have to wait and add the 22 minutes to the clock when they recycle it.
The movement of that swing arm, the access arm, to the command ship America itself occurred a little while ago, and at the time it happened, about 25 minutes before the scheduled launch, Gene Cernan remarked at the time, we're really hanging in the breeze now. And they were at that time. Of course, there's no breeze to speak of. It's a very mild night, a very warm night, temperature about 73 to 75 degrees. Very little breeze. We expected winds about 10 miles an hour, and we haven't got those. We do have some high clouds overhead, and they're being well illuminated by the big floodlights that are playing over the rocket. Those floodlights are still on. They will remain on even after the launch until the ship is airborne about 60 feet, and then they'll shut off.
By the way, Gene Cernan earlier this evening, within the past couple of hours, he's been aboard now about 2.5 hours, he and his crew, been in the command ship. Sent a message down to the launch. Here's Chuck Holland.
Saturn Launch Control. We're continuing our hold at the T-minus 30-second mark as the launch team assesses our problem. At this time, swing arm number 9 is going back to the 12-degree park position. This is in a position about 15 to 20 feet from the spacecraft. All safety procedures have proceeded normally. We're continuing our hold while we assess the problem at T-minus 30 seconds. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
We were saying that a little earlier this evening, Gene Cernan, the commander of Apollo 17, sent word to the launch team and to all of the technicians who put this together and checked it out that they had provided Cernan and his crew with the best set of spaceships and the best set of rockets to date in the Apollo program. This is the 6th and last of the Apollo moon landing missions, and he was quite proud of them, and he promised to be back to see them, first of all, when the trip was over. Now, since he had expressed that confidence, we understand he's sitting pretty confidently in the command ship America with Ron Evans and Jack Schmidt, his crewmen, waiting for the word as to what's causing the delay. They were pretty anxious to get off this evening. By the way, we might, while we've got some time here, get into a couple of little precedents they broke. They didn't have the normal astronaut breakfast of steak and eggs. They had a lighter breakfast this morning. But then they put away a dinner that's certainly a precedent. They had everything in the book, starting with steak and ending up with ice cream and fruit juices. And they had dinner actually only with their immediate co-workers in the crew area because of the health quarantine rule. They've been in quarantine for 3 weeks.
This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, the swing arm number 9 is now back to that retract position at the 12-degree position. Point out that the window we have tonight extends to 1:31 a.m. So we have some time here to assess the problem and then recycle and continue our countdown. We're continuing to hold at the 30-second mark at this time. T-minus 30 seconds and holding. This is Kennedy, launch control.
We have almost 3.5 hours waiting before this launch window closes, and the possibility of a launch tonight no longer exists. Let's explain what has happened once again. The launch of Apollo 17 toward the last...
George, I didn't... George,
yes,
sorry to bother you. I didn't understand that. You said the possibility of a launch tonight no longer exists.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The possibility of a launch tonight will no longer exist 3.5 hours or so from now. I say that is how much time we have before the possibility of a launch no longer exists tonight. If that is the case, then the launch would be delayed until tomorrow night. Same launch time scheduled, 9:33, with the same window. About almost 4 hours, but not quite. We'll recap exactly what has happened so far, and exactly what has happened so far we're not too terribly clear about. At 30 seconds before the scheduled launch, the launch countdown clock stopped. It was stopped automatically. It was stopped by the computer because something had gone wrong. That something appears so far to be minor. We have unconfirmed reports that the countdown clock will be reset to 22 minutes before launch. As I say, those are unconfirmed reports. We also have no indication exactly what has gone wrong yet, but apparently that 22-minute setback report we have indicates that it's not too terribly serious. They have pulled the access arm back now to a 12-degree position. It is close to and ready to drop into position to remove the astronauts if necessary. So far that isn't necessary, but the launch has been delayed for reasons that we're not quite sure. And the countdown clock stands at T-minus 30 seconds and holding. Red?
I'm just working on another unofficial report, George. Can you hang on to it for a second while I check a phone call?
I certainly will. The puzzled looks that started here and were just brief darting glances when the clock suddenly stopped have now turned into some long questioning stares. And people are beginning to walk around and talk to each other and ask each other what has happened. The eyes here are no longer riveted directly on the rocket. They're just looking around at themselves and wondering what exactly in the world this is. Well, we really don't know. We could make a number of speculations about what might have gone wrong, but evidently it is not too serious. And I'm wondering, with the retraction, or the putting down and then the retraction again of that access arm that comes from the mobile launcher to the rocket itself, if perhaps there's a suspicion that the problem might not be in that it didn't press the right button or didn't indicate when the final countdown procedures were going on that it was in exactly the position it was supposed to be in.
George,
I don't know. I personally suspect there may be something in there, Red.
I've just gotten another bit of unofficial information, but first, you have the best view. Can you see any fuel venting from the S4B area?
Yes, I can now. Just got a look at what appears to be some vapor coming from the base of the S4B area. Don't know exactly what it is, but it seems to be some vapor and venting from that area, so that we have 3 venting areas visible from here in that stack now. We should be getting a report from Chuck Hollinshead very soon, possibly an update on exactly what's going on. Red, was there something else you wanted?
No, I wanted to tell you that the S4B is now another one of the unofficial reports of a problem area. They're checking a hose, they're checking a swing arm, and they're checking the S4B. Those are all unofficial reports, George.
The S4B, that's the stage they call the Big Moose. That's the one that kicks it into its orbit around the Earth and then aims the ship toward the moon and sends it on its way. And it houses the moon lander as well. Chuck Hollinshead expected to give us a report from Apollo Launch Control. Here's Chuck. Apparently, here's not Chuck. There seems to be some holdup now in getting some signal from Chuck Hollinshead in Launch Control. Evidently, they had an announcement or some kind of report to make to us, but it may be reassessed because there was an indication that something was coming up from Launch Control. Chuck Hollinshead, who has been out here all morning, all afternoon, all day, and into the evening, and now into the night, stopped just short of going on microphone to say something. Exactly what that means, I'm not too sure either. And 2 young fellas right down in front of me, about a story below me, I'm on top of the ABC complex here at Launchpad 39A. They're sitting down and playing a game of cards. I guess they've lost interest for the moment, Red.
George, I can't see any venting from the S4B again. Can you see it?
I thought I saw it there for a moment. Now, I may be seeing, as we were talking a little while before we went on the air about the tricks your eyes play on you from a distance away at night. Now, we've never watched one of these rockets ready to go, fueled and venting at night before. We've seen them in the early morning hours when there was dawn around. But we may be having some visual tricks played on us. But I swear I see something, and it looks like vapor at the base of the bell on the S4B stage.
Good. Well, keep watching that vapor, will you? Because if it stops and we don't have a clock restart, we've got about a 10-minute warning. If those things seal suddenly, or if one is sealed, that vapor's getting hotter, and we'll then get an emergency warning. But I don't think we're going to have one tonight as long as you can see vapor.
Well, as I say, I think it's vapor. And again, my eyes may be playing tricks on me, but every now and again there is a wisp that crosses the portable launcher, the mobile launcher, at that level. At least so it appears to me. I can't see it that clearly. Sometimes I assume people in closer positions could see it, but nobody's very much closer now. The launch pad has been cleared because they were anticipating a launch 30 seconds after the clock stopped. Now, we've been holding for about 25 minutes now, 23 minutes or so, and still nothing. No indication of exactly what it is. We are getting reports, but so far those reports are not verified. And nothing from launch control to inform us of exactly what it is. Evidently,
ABC Radio News has decided to stay with its live coverage from Cape Kennedy until we are able to give you the official word on what has delayed the launch of Apollo 17. This is Merrill Mueller with George Engle at Cape Kennedy, and we will stay with this live coverage until we have the right answers. We will be getting a word from launch control in about 10 seconds, and George Engle is outside at a better observation point. Here is Chuck Hollinshead, launch control.
This is Apollo Saturn launch control. We're at T-minus 30 seconds and continuing our hold. The problem was with the terminal countdown sequencer, which failed to give the command to pressurize the third stage LOX tank. The crew in the firing room, realizing this or seeing this happen, pressurized the tanks manually, but this did not happen fast enough to satisfy the automatic sequencer. As was mentioned earlier during this sequence, everything must happen at a certain time before the next step in the sequence can take place. The next step that was to take place was the retraction of swing arm 9, and at the time that was to take place, the terminal sequencer had not had an indication that the third stage lock tanks had been pressurized. The plan now is to recycle to the T-minus 22-minute mark in the countdown. Now, this recycling procedure will take an additional 35 to 40 minutes. This still puts us well within our launch window. While we're recycling, we'll continue to review the data to determine just what the problem is and whether or not we can proceed from the T-minus 22-minute mark for a launch later in the window. The crew aboard the spacecraft has been alerted to the problem and understand what is happening. They're standing by there at this time. Now, T-minus 30 seconds and holding. This is Kennedy launch control.
Oh, there it is, Red. There's the answer for us.
39, where Apollo 17 is totally safe. The 3 astronauts are in the command ship America. They're waiting for word as to how to work around this sequencer, if it can be done manually, or whether it can be repaired so they can finish completing the fueling of the rocket tanks and go. This is Merrill Mueller with George Engle at Cape Kennedy.
This is the American Forces Radio and Television Service.
Love to sleep, both watches,
You're listening to live coverage of Apollo 17 from Cape Kennedy, with that coverage provided by the American Broadcasting Network, radio network. Apollo updates will be heard after the launch at regular hourly newscasts. We will be rejoining ABC for further coverage as soon as things begin to progress and they rejoin AFRTS Washington. Meanwhile, we present music from our Frankfurt studios. We are are standing by for further coverage from Cape Kennedy in Florida of the launch of Apollo 17, that coverage provided by ABC Radio Network. As soon as that coverage becomes available, we will again rejoin. As we've said before, the countdown was stopped at T-minus 30 seconds, and we have no further word except for the fact that it was presumed to be due to a minor problem of some sort. As I say, we'll be joining ABC again as soon as they rejoin AFRTS Washington, and we can therefore pick them up. Until then, we're presenting music from AFN in Frankfurt.
There's been a delay of over an hour in the scheduled launch of the Apollo 17 manned rocket to the moon. For a report on the status of the mission at this hour, we switch to Peter Hackett at Kennedy Space Center.
The pre-launch count has just been resumed here at Cape Kennedy, reset to T-minus 22 minutes. The problem, as explained by Mission Control, was this. With launch scheduled to go within 30 seconds, the automatic pre-launch sequencer shut down, failed to command the pressurization of the liquid oxygen tank in the third stage booster, the S4B stage. A launch crew operator, noticing what was happening, pushed a button manually to pressurize that tank, but it apparently wasn't quick enough, and the sequencer shut down. The best way now to pick up the count and redo many of the things that had been done once was to set the count back to T-minus 22 minutes. That is what has been done. We thus expect Apollo 17 will lift off toward the moon on the final U.S. manned moon flight within the next 15 minutes. Peter Hackett, NBC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
Personnel on the problem and the workaround. Out at the pad, the liquid oxygen continues to vent from the vehicle and is replenished. Liquid hydrogen is also vented from the vehicle as there is some boil off. However, because it is quite a volatile fuel, it's vented to a burn pond at the side of the pad. That burn pond is at the north side of the pad, and there it can be seen burning in a controlled condition at this time. This is a normal condition. Actually, during the day, this burns in such a pure manner that it cannot be seen. However, at night, it is clearly visible. Our countdown continuing to hold at the T-minus 8-minute mark at this time. T-minus 8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
And this is Merrill Mueller again with ABC Radio News special coverage from Cape Kennedy. George Engle is with me, but up in our observation tower on the roof. George, tell us about those sights out there.
Right now, that rocket is still sitting out there, Red. It's still bathed in pure white light. The report from Chuck Hollins had just a few moments ago explains the flame that a couple of people saw, several people saw, just as the clock approached the 30-second point, and we had the original stop. We're now due, tentatively due at least, in about 24 minutes to launch the Apollo 17 rocket. That is the latest word from the space agency. They're in a hold now. The clock has stopped 8 minutes before launch, and that's exactly where she stands. The spectators here around the launch complex haven't made a move to go home. Some have walked away to get a cup of coffee or to look around or talk to people, but everybody is staying pretty much right where they are. They're still waiting for it to go, and it may be about 25 minutes from now, Red.
We're just trying to determine what could be the launch times tonight, but of course that's all conditioned on when they restart the clock. And as you were explaining, the experts over in Launch Control, and incidentally another team of experts in Houston at Mission Control, are poring over the data from the computers that control this launch, and they're trying to pinpoint why this electrical glitch appeared, which, or I should say, why the electrical glitch didn't appear, because the problem arose when a signal should have indicated that the fuel tank on the third stage of the rocket had built up the proper pressures for launch. That signal did not originate. It never came through the sequencer to the computer. And the minute it did not appear, the sequencer then signaled other things not to happen, and the computer shut everything down. That's why we were delayed earlier tonight. Now we're delayed because they want to know exactly why that situation arose and whether there is something else they should look at before they commit
the Apollo 17 to an actual launching. George?
The weather remains good for a launch, at least over the launch complex. The skies have cleared considerably. Those clouds at 15,000 feet that were over the launch pad seem to have pretty much gone away. The stars are clearly visible, but off to the east, there's a very large thunderhead, an electrical storm going on out there. Now, that is generally the direction that the rocket will take when it begins to climb out on course, on its new azimuth, its new angle away from the Earth. And right now, we're still at launch minus 8 minutes, and we're still holding, Red.
And the clock will not start again, we're told, for at least another 10 or 15 minutes, and we're 8 minutes from launching when the clock does restart. And we have no idea when that will be, except it cannot go beyond 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. This is Merrill Mueller with George Engle for ABC Radio News and a live special report from Cape Kennedy, Florida.
In this economic-minded society, you can buy virtually anything, but you can't go to the store and buy several months or years to finish up a job such as raising your family. There is a way to buy time, though. It's a new program called the Survivor Benefit Plan. This plan buys time for you in the form of financial security for your family if you die. SBP, the Survivor Benefit Plan. Look into it now. Your personnel office has details.
This is the American Forces Radio and Television Service. There's no telling exactly when it will start. Expected around midnight, Red.
What they're doing right now is they're sending all their data by high-speed teleprinter, or by computer line, actually, from here at Cape Kennedy up to the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. That center tested out this Saturn V rocket and all its parts. And they're sending the data up there for Marshall to reanalyze and confirm what the experts have found here, namely that they think there's something wrong now. The possibility is there's something wrong in the sequencer. They can work around the sequencer manually by having the launch controllers actually press the buttons and press them fast enough when they know they have to. And if that is the case, they may still attempt the launch. If that's not the case, the word will come back from Marshall.
The last word we have from Chuck Hollinshead, the voice of Apollo of launch control here at Cape Kennedy, is that the astronauts are satisfied with that additional 20-minute delay. Gene Cernan is quoted as saying that they're going to use all 3 stages of that rocket, and they just as soon take the extra time to make sure that all of those stages function properly. Now, they've been sitting up there in Command Ship America for a very long time now, several hours. They're content to sit and wait a while longer. The launch now delayed almost 2 hours, an hour and 45 minutes. And still, we're holding. The countdown clock at 8 minutes before launch. Indication, the latest that we have, probably, that we will go about midnight or thereabouts. Now, that is not firm. And we will be prepared to be back and bring you complete coverage as soon as that countdown clock resumes. The countdown clock is not running now. The countdown clock stops at 8 minutes before launch, and there it stands. Red, you're industriously looking up something. Is there some point you wanted to make?
I'm trying to find a date, but if memory serves me right, it's been almost 2 years since the Marshall Space Flight Center test-fired these engines in Huntsville, Alabama. Parts of this rocket are over 5 years old. Now, that's where you begin to get into deterioration problems in spaceflight equipment when there's no production line to continue making new parts.
Most of the parts have been sent back to the manufacturer at one time or another or held in storage and then retested. But the shelf life is not indefinite. They simply can't take these highly critical pieces of space equipment and just put them away, shelve them, let them stay for years. So right now, maybe possibly we're seeing some evidence of that shelf life, how long things can last after they're manufactured and before they're used. Red?
Well, we've got to go through all of this data processing, which has been going on now since the original false start tonight, 30 seconds before engine ignition, a very close fine line there, but the sequencer and the emergency detection system and the computer all pulled the plugs and started the safety checks right through the rocket system before anything could happen. Everybody's safe, and we're waiting the word.
right now is that we don't have any word. We don't know exactly when it's going to start. But when it does, when the countdown clock resumes, we'll be back to bring you complete, detailed coverage of the launch of Apollo 17. This is George Engle with Merrill Mueller at Cape Kennedy. And this has been a live special report from ABC Radio News.
And that concludes this special broadcast. We now join our regularly scheduled program, already in progress.
It's really special.
It's 6 o'clock in Central Europe. Former President Truman said to be near death. Apollo 17 still on the ground after 2 delays. And a continued flurry of activity around the Vietnam peace talks.
AFN News from the wires of the AP and UPI.
Good morning, John Wood, AFN News reporting. Countdown for Apollo 17, America's last planned flight to the moon, was halted for a second time early today, while crews troubleshot a problem with a computer-driven device which failed to pressurize an oxygen tank. The time was 8 minutes until blastoff when the second delay came. The countdown originally had moved smoothly to within 30 seconds of the planned liftoff time of 9:53 p.m. or 3:53 Central European Time when the trouble occurred. The countdown clock was reset for 22 minutes before liftoff, and the count was picked up at 10:58 p.m. Florida time or 4:58 Central European Time. They 8 minutes before launch and stopped the process a second time. Experts said they felt the cause of the trouble had been found but needed more time to be certain, and Launch Control Center added that the astronauts remained calm throughout the delay. When told of the second countdown hold, Mission Control said that astronaut Eugene Cernan commented that perhaps they should have a conversation about a good book, Thomas Hardy or something like that, Cernan reportedly said.
George, I just wanted to quickly say that the computer is going to be told a little white lie. The launch directors are pressurizing the fuel tank on the third stage of the rocket, and they will then send a false signal down through the sequencer to make the computer believe that everything has been done electronically when actually one thing required human hand. George?
So they're overriding the automatic computer sequence in order to do that. And that's, I guess, just improving on what they've already improved on, almost to the point of perfection. It was that signal detected that held up the launch. It's been held up now. About the time it goes off, it'll be about 2 hours and 40 minutes late. Now, that's still well within the perimeters of this launch. It means that it can be launched. It can go to the right place at the right time, make a successful landing on the moon. The entire mission can go as planned within this launch window. That launch window has just a little over an hour still open, and we're 5 minutes and 50-some-odd seconds away from launch. Red?
While you're on that point of 2 hours and 33 minutes of the delay in this, it means exactly 2 orbits of space flight to Chuck Collinson in Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 5 minutes, 40 seconds, and counting. At this time, the various elements of the launch team have been reporting into Bill Schick, the test supervisor, indicating that we are go to continue. Mission Director Chet Lee just verifies that we are go for launch. Safety indicates that we have a go. First stage test conductor, this is the man who has charge of those 5 first stage engines, which will give us the liftoff, has indicated a go for launch. Launch operations manager Paul Donnelly also giving us a go for launch. And finally, the launch director, Walter Caprian, says we are go for launch. We've passed the 5-minute mark now, and swing arm number 9. This is the access arm to the spacecraft. It's coming back to the full retract position. It moves back alongside the mobile launch tower, and it will remain there now through the final portion of the countdown and the launch.
The weather is as clear as it has been all evening.
At the T-minus 60-second mark, 20 nozzles will start flame deflector deluge of 13,000 gallons per minute of water pouring down on that flame deflector. So a great deal of what is seen at launch time, which looks like smoke, is actually steam as this water is burned off. This water to cool the pad area and to cool the equipment alongside of the launch tower, as the water also pours across the swing arms and the launch tower.
The wind is picked up considerably.
4-minute mark in the countdown now. T-minus 4 minutes, 5 seconds, and continuing to count. At the 4-minute mark, we'll stand by for a final go from
Stern, the launch vehicle test conductor. He's given a go. The launch operations manager now switching over to the Astrocom circuit. This is the circuit that the astronauts, the launch operations manager, and the spacecraft communicator will remain on. They have this private circuit to keep extraneous talk off of their circuit. They are checking in. They are checking in now on the Astrocom circuit, indicating that they are go.
This 2-hour and 30-minute delay for the launch of Apollo 17 tonight is vital. Apollo 17 must leave for the moon from a point over the South Atlantic, and this 2-hour and 30-minute delay puts it back exactly where it should be after 2 orbits of the Earth. This is Merrill Mueller with George Engle with a live special report from Cape Kennedy, Florida. This is Merrill Mueller with George Engle with a live special report from Cape Kennedy, Florida on the launch of Apollo 17. We go back to Chuck Hollinshead, the voice of launch control.
47 seconds and counting as we are on the terminal sequencer.
Gusty wind is picked up here at Cape Kennedy, Red.
Minus 50-second mark, we'll be looking for that critical power transfer. This is where we transfer from the external power source, which has been feeding the 3 stages of the launch vehicle, to internal power, to the flight batteries aboard the space vehicle. It's expected that given proper weather conditions, people will be observing this flight from as much as 500 miles away. This includes a large portion of the southeastern United States, the northern tip of Cuba, and the Bahama Islands. Now approaching the 2-minute mark. Mark, T-minus 2 minutes and counting, and the countdown continues to move along smoothly. Now in the terminal countdown portion. The automatic sequencer has stopped the replenishing of the liquid oxygen and the liquid hydrogen. We're standing by now to begin pressurization of the fuel tanks. The second stage fuel tank pressurized. Third stage fuel tank pressurized. The countdown continuing to move along smoothly. T-minus 90 seconds. T-minus 90 seconds. Countdown continuing smoothly. S4B propellants pressurized. The indication now using the workaround showing the S4B propellants have been pressurized.
The rocket is still venting.
Now looking at the liquid hydrogen tanks as they become pressurized. LH2 aboard the second stage pressurized. All propellants now aboard the second stage pressurized as we approach the 1-minute mark in the countdown. Mark, T-minus 1 minute and counting. Now in the final minute of the countdown. At T-minus 45 seconds, Gene Cernan will make the final guidance alignment. This is the Mark, T-minus 45, and Gene Cernan made that final guidance alignment. That's the last action taken by the crew aboard the space vehicle. Now approaching the half-minute mark. T-minus 33, T-minus 30 seconds, and continuing on now. Continuing on at the T-minus 26-second mark, T-minus 25. We'll get a final guidance release at the T-minus 17-second mark. T-minus 17, final guidance release. We'll expect engine ignition at 8.9 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, ignition sequence started. All engines are started. We have ignition
Brighter than daylight.
0. We have a liftoff.
A false daylight, a false dawn over Cape Kennedy as that rocket starts up. Spectators applauding as it begins moving to the top of the tower. Over the top of the tower. Here comes the sound now, that roar. That flame is incredibly bright. Brighter than daylight out there. Climbing straight up. Huge column of red-orange flame melting out of that rocket, unlike anything I have ever seen before. A terribly dramatic sight. Going up into the base of some thin clouds now and burning them away. Climbing out. Higher and higher, beginning to arc over now. Very slightly. That incredible satisfied roar. And such a fantastically bright light.
On 2.5 miles. Mark, mode 1 Bravo.
Roger, 1 Bravo, we're go at 1 minute.
Roger, Gene, you're looking great. Right on the line.
Everybody says looking great. Right on the line. We're now 1 mile downrange. Launch vehicle 4.2 miles high.
Bob Obermeyer and Doug Ward talking from Houston. George?
A great bright star up there in the sky, Red. Just ahead of us, just to the east of us. Beginning to smoke a bit. Coming up on maximum dynamic pressure at this point. This is the largest area of buffeting. 4 miles and the spectators are applauding. And the velocity approaching 3,000 feet per second.
Looking great.
What a phenomenal sight that is. Unforgettable. Arcing over now, turning over to the right. Beginning to move out on its new trajectory. That flame, which was bright orange and yellow at first, is now glowing red. Glowing red with a blue tail falling behind it. It looks something like a meteor up there.
Mark, mode 1 Charlie.
And the flight dynamics officer says we look good on all sources, right on the trajectory. They promised us a spectacular launch. And we got it. Flight Director Gene Kranz taking a status for staging. We say we look good for staging.
Roger, we'll go here.
That was Gene Cernan from America. Roger, we're go here. He's been reporting that all the way up. Roger, inboard. George, staging, watch it.
I'm watching for staging. I can see it very clearly. Very, very clearly. A slight flash up there. Crew will experience maximum G-force of about 4 Gs at shutdown. Now that flame has turned from red to blue. Coming up on first stage shutdown. There it is. They're staging. Fireworks. It's the 4th of July up there. And we've had shutdown on time on the first stage. The separation of the first and second stage. And now it's a clear blue flame. It looks like another star up there.
Sure felt like it. I think we saw them all from here.
Roger, Jack, and the thrust is going, all 5 of them. They're running good.
Okay, 3 minutes and we're go.
Over 1,600 miles an hour. And climbing out.
Apollo 7,
like a star.
Apollo 17 left the launch pad weighing almost 3,300 tons. It's now weighing 745 tons.
George? Yep. We're hearing a lot of yippies in the audience from the spectators who are walking away.
Roger the tower, you're mode 2.
Roger, mode 2.
That's a happy crew up there.
That was Jack Smith. There goes the tower.
That's the launch escape tower.
Steering has converged and CMC is go. You're going right down the pipe, 17.
Okay, Bob, I do confirm guidance.
There's a big cloud, an artificial cloud hanging over the launch pad. That's the automatic guidance system, the inertial guidance system performing properly.
Breakers, and we've seen it all. Ignition, staging, and tower.
Roger, got you.
And everything is fine, just fine. What a spectacular sight. 65 miles high.
Okay, 4 minutes and we're go here, Bob.
Roger, Gene. We're going around the road. Let's go here.
That's a large light.
Right down the line. Excellent communication with an echo somewhere. They'll clear that up in a minute.
It still looks like a star, Red. Moving out now toward the east-southeast from this launch position.
Okay, 4:30 and we're still go on board.
Roger, 17, here, go.
You'll see it
Let me
right
tell you,
away.
this night launch is something to behold.
Yes, sir.
That's from up there, too. And all the light was behind them as they climbed out.
This should be coming up on 5 minutes, so everything still looks very good in the launch of Apollo 17. The launch vehicle spacecraft now 80 miles high, 230 miles downrange. I can still see that
5 minutes
rocket up there.
Go down here. You look great.
The flame from the second
Okay, Robert,
stage
we go here at 5.
is bright and clear. It's a dwindling star. Still very bright, brighter than any of the other stars in that quarter of the heavens. You can still see it moving away.
George, you might like to know that you're looking at a star that's over the Atlantic, exactly halfway between Bermuda and Grand Turk, or the Dominican Republic. S2 shutdown is 9 plus 20, nominal time.
Indication of how bright it is.
Roger.
Capcom Robert Overmeyer advising Gene Cernan and the crew aboard Apollo 17. The second stage shut down at about 9 minutes
will be right on the plan.
That's shut down about 3.5 minutes from now.
6 minutes.
Stand by for S4B to COI capability.
George, if
Mark, S4B to COI capability.
Roger, S4B to COI, we're going 6.
I just lost it.
Just lost it?
Just lost it. It just winked out. I just went behind some
see
clouds.
that staging, if you can keep your eyes going that way and see that staging, you're going to be seeing a staging that is southeast of Bermuda.
Still right on the nominal trajectory. At an
Every now and again.
about 92 nautical miles.
We got 4 good motors, and we're going 620.
Roger, 17, we copied the gimbals. We're watching. It looks good.
About 3 minutes from now.
That's an early cutoff of that center engine, George. Let's watch it.
Yes,
He
it is
said
early.
4 good motors. That's a minute early on that center engine.
Those helicopters are coming back in now. Rescue helicopters flying back down the beach.
Stand by for S4B to orbit capability. Mark, S4B to orbit capability.
They have it now. They can get up there.
And we'd like copy Delta Jack.
Roger, you've got it.
This may be for an earlier or an extended firing in the S4B.
We have sufficient velocity to make orbit with the Saturn third stage should we have an unexpected early shutdown of the second stage.
Good on board.
They're watching the fact they're only operating on 4 motors right now instead of 5, but they have all the spare power they need in the final third stage of the rocket, which will get them up safely into Earth orbit. But they're watching it in case they have to light it early.
It's been about a minute now since I saw the light.
Second stage shutdown and ignition of the Saturn third stage.
I'm going to stay up here and keep watching for it, Red. If I can see it, it should be sensational.
We'll be shutting down as scheduled in about 10 seconds.
We have inboard cutoff.
Roger, inboard on time.
Well, apparently they did have it.
They did have it.
Shut down wouldn't be on time.
He said distinctly 4 engines.
I got another twinkle then. Just another glimpse of that light.
17 now, 625 miles downrange, 93 miles in altitude.
Did you read that, George? That's what you saw.
8 minutes,
Wow.
we are go.
Roger, 17, it looks great.
It's just impossible to see that far without my glasses. And I saw it. There it is again.
Got about 1 minute to outboard engine cutoff.
The spacecraft guidance system's agreeing very closely with the Saturn guidance. It looks good.
First staging.
I think I can tell you why. It's just
We are go for staging up here.
appears once in a while because of that thunderstorm out in that area that's been flashing lightning at us all evening. I'm sure that I'm
less
catching
than
it.
1 minute.
I sure hope I can see that, Red. I'd like to see it all.
You have level 10 time this time. If you do, you're going to be able to see it at 907 miles out.
That's a long way.
Apollo 17 traveling at 21,000 feet per second. It's achieved about 83% of the velocity required for a minimum orbit.
It's right on the plan, flight plan.
I'm at Bob, and 17 is go.
Roger, 17, you're go here.
Over 4,400 miles an hour.
About 10 seconds to staging.
When they drop the second stage of the rocket, they'll still be weighing 189 tons. Stand by for mode 4 capability.
Let's do cutoff.
Mark, mode 4 capability, and we copy cutoff. Cutoff is
Roger,
right,
mode 4.
3 seconds late.
And we do have S4B ignition.
They're on their way.
I can't see it.
The thrusters look good on it.
Can't see it with the naked eye.
Bob.
Roger.
That was quite a launch. Quite a launch, Red.
And we're about 2 minutes from
We're up to 23,000 feet per
Earth
second.
orbit
We're shooting
insertion.
for something over 25,000.
which will be just south of the tracking ship Vanguard in the mid-Atlantic. 17, the steering has converged, and the CMC is go. You look great.
Roger, the CMC is go. Step mass and 17 is go on board.
When the S4B, their third stage of the rocket, shuts down. Go for orbit. Go for orbit. When the S4B, the third stage of their rocket, shuts down, they'll be doing better than 16,500 miles an hour, and you add the Earth's kick, the Earth's revolution kick to that, and they have orbital
10 minutes,
speed.
30 seconds after liftoff. And the spacecraft launch vehicle now 1,100 miles rather downrange, and altitude 93.4 miles.
Roger, 17. That is right on the flight plan. That's Bob Overmeyer, one of the astronauts in Houston, talking to Gene Cernan in America, and the other voice is Doug Ward, a public affairs officer at Mission Control in Houston.
And we're about 1 minute from shutdown, about 1 minute from orbit insertion.
That's Doug Ward. And the crew is pretty quiet, but they're also pretty busy.
11 minutes and we are go.
Roger, Gene, and cutoff will be at 11 plus 47. 11 plus 47. That'll come early. 3 seconds early.
About a half a minute from now. But it's quite a sight up on that roof.
This Earth orbit injection, by the way, which is where this S4B will be shutting down for the first time.
11:30 and we're go here and stand by.
Roger. It happens to overlay the same point where they will leave for the moon 2 orbits later. 2 revolutions of the Earth. 4-2. They got it 8 seconds early.
Understand. Cut off at 4-2. Roger, we copy.
See what they read out in the way of figures.
And that looked like a near nominal shutdown. At shutdown, we show 25,600 feet per second. That also looks very close.
89.5.
Roger, we're copying the disk to you.
25,600 is about 1,400.
Gene Cernan reporting the onboard indication of an orbit of 93.5 by 89.5. Now, we'll be getting tracking and confirming that here on the ground.
That will take them up there because their speed is about 1,400 feet a second faster than they planned, and they're still climbing, and they were looking for a 106-mile orbit. And he said 92, didn't he?
93.5 by 89.5, and that's a good parking orbit.
They got it made.
That's a fine orbit. They can leave from that in about 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Looks like the tank pressures are running.
Roger, Gene, the range safety is safe, and you are in a go orbit nominal.
Roger, go orbit nominal. Thank you.
That's the one they wanted. And that's the situation with the astronauts safely in orbit in our coverage of the flight of Apollo 17 from ABC Radio News.
You've been listening to live coverage of the Apollo 17 liftoff on the last manned flight to the moon. It's now 14 minutes before 7 o'clock, and with the 7 o'clock report coming up at 7 o'clock, and now the...
It's 7 o'clock in Central Europe. Former President Truman said to be somewhat better, but still in critical condition. Apollo 17 on its way to the moon after 2 delays, and another secret peace talk session scheduled today in Paris.
The 7 o'clock report, an expanded summary of world developments compiled from the wires of the AP and UPI, with reports from the major American networks, sports, and stock market activity.
And what AFN is reporting. After 2 delays because of a computer problem, America's Apollo 17 explorers vaulted toward the moon at 6:33 a.m. today as their fiery rocket turned night into day and propelled them on what may be man's last journey in this century to an alien world.
10, 9, 8, 7, ignition sequence. Started. All engines are started.
Brighter than daylight.
0, we have a liftoff.
A false daylight, a false dawn over Cape Kennedy as that rocket starts up. Spectators applauding as it begins moving to the top of the tower. Over the top of the tower. Here comes the sound now, that roar. That flame is incredibly bright. Brighter than daylight out there. Climbing straight up. Huge
column of red-orange flame belching out of that rocket, unlike anything I have ever seen before. A terribly dramatic sight. Going up into the base of some thin clouds now and burning them away.
Hundreds of thousands of persons jammed viewing areas in the Cape Kennedy area to watch the blazing departure and the first after-dark launching of a U.S. manned in space flight. To reach the moon, Apollo 17 must first circle the Earth 2 times in slightly more than 3 hours, while the astronauts and ground controllers check all systems. Then a second burst from the rocket's third stage is to propel them toward their distant target.
It's 4 o'clock in Central Europe. The Vietnamese communists claim the Paris peace talks still are deadlocked.
AFN News from the wires of the AP and UPI.
Good afternoon, this is Bob Andresen.
It's 6 o'clock in Central Europe. Apollo 17 streaks toward the moon. Public pessimism in Paris as Kissinger and Tow meet for more secret talks. Former President Harry Truman slightly improved, and President Nixon prepares to announce further cabinet changes in his second term.
Mr. Nixon has given an assurance to NATO on the maintenance of American troop levels in Europe.
World developments, including
The French government has approved a series of measures to fight inflation. Pakistan says that it has now resolved its differences with India over the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir.
Smoothly, following an unusual last-minute snag that forced the 2-hour
The American
and
and North Vietnamese peace negotiators, Dr. Kissinger and Lady Tow, are having another meeting in Paris to discuss steps towards a Vietnam peace settlement. Not long before they met, the French Foreign Minister, Mr. Schuman, returned unexpectedly from NATO meetings in Brussels to meet Dr. Kissinger, and is reported to have been briefed on the progress of the talks. A correspondent in Paris, in a dispatch to the BBC, says Mr. Schuman's meeting was seen by some observers as another indication that an announcement on a settlement is imminent. But the representative of the National Liberation Front, Mrs. Bean, says there is no basis for rumors that the signing of an agreement is imminent. Mrs. Bean made her statement when she arrived for the weekly session of the regular Paris peace talks, which have been going on at the same time as the secret contacts between Dr. Kissinger and Lady Tow. In Saigon, President Thieu has met the American ambassador to South Vietnam, Mr. Ellsworth Bunker, and later President Thieu is reported to have called in his National Security Council, the country's top policy-making body. Saigon Radio has repeated South Vietnam's demands for a withdrawal of North Vietnamese forces before it will agree to a peace agreement. South Vietnamese bombers have attacked the site used to launch yesterday's communist rocket assault on the big airbase just outside Saigon. The South Vietnamese say that about 25 communists who took part in the rocket attack have been killed since the bombing of the area started.